I think that self-promotion is basically a misnomer. The only effective promotion isn't what I say about me, but what other people say about me.
Welcome to The Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. This is the podcast that helps you to pursue work that matters, make a difference with your art, and discover your true voice. I'm your host, Jared Easley. Jeff answers more questions from listeners on this episode, but first, this show is brought to you by Jeff's latest book, The In-Between. The In-Between is a call to accept the importance that waiting plays in our lives. You are invited to pick up your copy of The In-Between by going to goinswriter.com/inbetween. And now, Jeff Goins.
Jeff, we have a question from Stephanie Coleman Fish, and Stephanie's writing something every day, and she wants to know, is there a way she can put together little blurbs into a book? Do you have any suggestions on how she could take that, and specifically chronological issues, things like that?
Well, good question. Great idea. But it is more difficult than it sounds, because how a book is unlike a blog is that it is more than just the sum of its parts. It's more than just a bunch of little messages dripped out over time like a blog is. A good book is a comprehensive work. It's something that when you go from page 1 to 200 or however long it is, when you're done with it, you've learned something or you've been inspired. You know, like when you close the book, you are done with that topic or that idea or that story, and it gives you this sense of completion. You now know how to cook like Julia Child does, or you now know how to go through life living more inspired, whatever it might be. And so I think the challenge is when somebody translates a bunch of blog posts to a book, you can do that. You can do that fine, and there's no harm in doing that. But I think to write a really good book, you have to take a step back. And I think using a blog is a great way to practice. It's a great way to build an audience and for you to get up every day and share your work with the world and get feedback on it. And it's a good way to get writing done. But that in and of itself won't give you a book. Now, I am always repurposing content from my blog or articles that I've written for books that I'm writing because, I'm starting to write this book and I realize, I've already said this somewhere else better and I can probably repurpose that here. So the real question is, how do I take work that I've written elsewhere and start, repurposing and piecing it together and refitting it into this new book format? And maybe that was the question from the get-go. I just wasn't very good at listening. But basically, what I would recommend is this. For right now, get all of your content, which I would just call research, and put that aside and sit down and ask yourself the question, what is this book about? Not what are all these blog posts about, but what is the book that I want to write? What is it about? And a similar question is, what can the reader get out of this? What do I want the reader to walk away with once they've finished this book? And decide, that is a statement or maybe a series of statements where you go, I want them to, even if it's a work of fiction, I want them to live a happier life, or I want them to wake up tomorrow grateful for everything that they have. I mean, you think about, certain movies. I think about that movie, The Family Man, which is like a holiday movie, that comes on every Christmas with Nicolas Cage. That movie isn't just about family. It's really about being grateful for whatever and whomever you have. So, every story, every book has a message. What's yours? So decide what that is. Then decide kind of how you're going to chunk it out. Again, not based on the research that you have, but based on what, somebody is supposed to get out of this. So let's say you're going to go with the theme of gratitude and you think that there are basically, 10 lessons of gratitude. And you're going to use stories from your own life to illustrate these different lessons or principles. And these may be explicitly or implicitly stated or just not even stated, just implied. So then you're going to write that out, and that's going to basically be your outline. And when you're writing an outline, you can basically say, here's the name of the chapter, and then in this chapter, I'm going to write about this, this, and this. I'm going to use this story, and you're just kind of breaking it out based on, the structure of whatever that idea or principle is. And you're probably going to have an introduction and some kind of conclusion, and everything in the middle is going to, be how you walk through this theme with these different stories. And each story is going to build on itself. And so once you've done that, and now you've got your research, it's time to, write the book. And so you're going to start filling in your outline with the pieces that you already have. But this is the really crucial part. Instead of just dropping things in and saying, okay, I've got a book now, because you're actually writing the book and you're using those pieces as research, basically content, that you have already written, and you're pulling it in much like you would, somebody else's words, or, a study that you did or something. You're going to reappropriate it for this new context. You're going to change some of the words. You're going to work in transitions and tie this part with this part that you said, the thing that you said 2 chapters ago. You're going to start seeing the book as a whole instead of a bunch of pieces that you've thrown together that you hope make sense. Because if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to the reader. And so you get a book, and you're using the same pieces, but the process is much different from just saying, I'm going to throw all this stuff together and figure out how to organize it. You decide what you want the reader to get out of the book and really what they want, and then you outline it, and then you fill in those pieces, adding transitions, references, that sort of thing, and at the end you tie it all together, and hopefully it'll make sense.
Jeff, Tammy Booth is interested in learning more about finding focus. She has a lot of ideas, but she struggles to start anything. What's your advice for her?
Well, I am right there with you. I get so distracted, and this is, one of the reasons why I love / hate the internet, is it has been the perfect distraction for me when I, wanted to do something other than work. And at the same time, pursuing some of those distractions has, provided a nice little career for me. So I can't be too ungrateful. But all that to say, there are times when you just need to sit down and do the work. In fact, I think this is a non-negotiable. And for me, it is not something that comes naturally, but it is a discipline. Without focus, you will not do your best work. Now, I wrote about this at one point, and I said, half-finished paintings don't make it into museums. Half-drawn blueprints don't make for well-constructed buildings, or any building at all. And half-finished manuscripts don't make for much of a story. In other words, you can only be inspired so far. You cannot create compelling art if you don't learn to focus, to stay on track. So, getting your work done is essential, and treating it as a discipline, not just something that you feel inspired to do sometimes, is really what separates the amateurs from the professionals. You have to know how to dig in and do the work and adopt basically a blue collar work ethic, as it were. And I think Stephen Pressfield talks a lot about that, and that resonates with me. I tend to be lazy towards my craft, and it's only with discipline that I'm able to accomplish anything. So really, and I don't do these, very well every day, but I kind of stumble through them like any discipline, like working out or taking care of my lawn, or, anything that I don't feel like I do a great job at, but I just know if I keep showing up and putting the work in, I'm going to see results, not immediately, but over time. If I continue to be consistent, I will see the fruit of my labor. I recommend doing several things. First, block out time. So the number one reason that people don't create, they don't write, they don't start that side business, they don't do the thing that they feel called to do, is they simply don't make time. And they might feel like they don't have time, but the reality is, with as little as 30 minutes a day, several days a week, you can create a habit and you can build enough momentum to do something substantial. And you might feel like you don't have enough time to do that, but I think you probably do. And if this thing is, this passion, this book that you have to write, this venture that you have to start, is something that you are called to do, that might be your life's work, you really can't spare 30 minutes a day. I just, I find that hard to believe. Either you're not as passionate about it as you think you are, or there are little chunks of time that you can find. And so I think the best time to, set a time to be creative is a time that you don't already have blocked. So if you usually go out on your lunch break, or you think you're going to block out every day at 3 p.m., but something always ends up taking up that spot, find a block of time that's not going to get interrupted. And I think some of the best times are early in the morning and late in the evening, where there just aren't a lot of distractions. There aren't that many people emailing me at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And so even if email is the first thing that I check when I get on my computer, I run out of emails to read, and I'm up and nobody else is, and so I'm going to write. So block out some time to be creative. Second, something that I love doing, and I've read a lot about procrastination, and a lot of the experts say the same thing, which is that you can only concentrate for so long. And so in order to stay focused, now one of the things you have to do is basically give yourself an incentive for later. And so I recommend, and I practice this by rewarding yourself with breaks, and basically bribing yourself with a treat, a snack, lunch, checking email, whatever, suits your fancy. Whatever thing that you want to do now because it's immediately gratifying, don't deny yourself that thing, but say, okay, I'm first going to write 500 words. I'm first going to, answer all these emails or read this book or whatever it is that you're trying to do. I'm first going to do this for the next, 30, 60, 90 minutes. And then I'm going to give myself a 5-minute break where I get to do this thing. Or maybe you're going to do something for 3 hours and you're going to get like a 15-minute break. And the cool thing about that is the break will recharge you. It'll make you come back with even more energy, and it will subconsciously create this if-then scenario where if you do things that you don't really want to do right now, good things happen later. And you're essentially retraining your brain to be more productive by working for a reward. Now, obviously, we know that in many ways the work itself is a reward, but we don't really see that until we're done. And so we need some kind of motivation while we're in the middle of it. So the third thing I recommend doing is turning off all noise, all distractions while you're in the midst of your work, while you're writing or brainstorming or whatever it is that you're doing. And that means, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb or leaving it in the other room, turning off email, turning off anything that is going to be a temptation, and focus. And one of the best ways to do this, because we only have so much willpower, is to put yourself into a scenario where you have no choice. Like, I have a friend who is a writer and he can't get any writing done at Starbucks because he's always checking his email. So he goes to the public library where there isn't any Wi-Fi and he writes there. Or I have another friend who forces himself to be more productive, where he needs to focus on certain tasks, but they're the last thing that he wants to do because they're not urgent, but they're certainly important. So he focuses on urgent things like texting people or emailing or whatever. And so what he does is he leaves his house, he goes to a coffee shop, and he leaves his computer charger. He takes his laptop, but he leaves his charger at home, and he's only got like half a battery. And he knows he only has like sometimes, an hour, 2 hours, or sometimes as little as 20 minutes to get this thing done before the computer dies. So he doesn't have that luxury. Since he works for himself, there's no really end of the day. He doesn't have that luxury of saying, well, I'll just charge this and I'll do this later. He has to get it done then. And so that's, another way that you can really force yourself into a place where you are reducing noise, you're reducing distractions, and you're allowing the most important things to rise to the top. Lastly, I would say set a goal. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, set a small but achievable goal. Not a big challenge. Not I want to write 5,000 words a day, or I want to do something that I've never done before. Essentially, that's gonna lead to all kinds of disillusion when you fail. But if you could set a small goal, like for me right now, my goal is to write at least 500 words a day. And there are plenty of days where I write a lot more than that. But since the bar is so low, but it's substantial enough that if I keep doing it, I'm going to end up having a good amount of words by the end of the week, by the end of the month, that when I show up and I just do the bare minimum, which only takes me about 20 or 30 minutes, I feel like I've accomplished something. And so now everything that I do on top of that is gravy. It's just additional work that I've done, and I feel even better about it. I feel like there's this sense of momentum. So, set a goal, make it realistic, make it something that you can do and feel good about, that's not overly challenging. And at the same time isn't, such a low bar thing like I'm going to get up and brush my teeth every day. Something that's really that if you do it, you're going to feel good about it, but it's not so impossibly, out of reach that if you don't do it, you're just human. So that's what I would say when it comes to focusing. You need to block out time. You need to reward yourself with breaks. You need to trick yourself into being more productive, even if it means turning off the noise. And you need to set a goal and meet it regularly. And if you consistently do that, you're going to see substantial growth, and you're going to see that focus is not something that you find. People talk about finding focus all the time. Focus is not something that you find, it's something that you create.
Jeff, Phil Bogan is struggling with marketing. What encouragement do you have for Phil?
Well, I think it's typical for people like us, and I use us with air quotes, but I think a lot of people listening to this consider themselves creative or artists, or just, let's be honest, most of us don't like to promote ourselves. We don't like to talk about ourselves. It's just, and even if we do, we certainly wouldn't say that we do or admit it, because that's just not something that's, socially acceptable. It's better to be humble. It's better to have other people talk about you than to talk about yourself. And although we don't like talking about ourselves, I think if you look at our voyeuristic and frankly sometimes egotistic culture that we live in right now, where everybody's on Facebook, everybody's on Twitter, everybody is engaged in the conversation, and honestly, a lot of us, not all of us, but many of us, are concerned about what other people are saying about us. And there was this virus that was being sent around Twitter for a while, and if you've ever gotten a direct message from a stranger on Twitter and it looked kind of spammy or something, you know that people have tried lots of different things to trick you. And one of the most popular methods for doing that was a simple line that said, "Hey, did you hear what people are saying about you? Click here to find out more." And if you are like me, everything in you, every insecure, Amazon rank checking bone starts to tremble, because you go, oh my gosh, they don't like me. I've been found a fake. How do I get these people to start talking good about me? How do I go defend my honor? And the truth is, we don't want to have to be the ones to do that. Ideally, other people would do that for us. And so all that to say, join the crowd. This means you're probably an artist, and that's a good thing. But the reality is, we know that sometimes if we don't talk about our stuff, or if we don't spread the word initially, nobody is going to do that. So do we just sit in a corner and create work, hoping somebody will come discover us? Do we, pick up the bullhorn and, go stand in the street corner and turn into that annoying person? How do we do this? How do we balance this tension between creating good work and then promoting it? And I think the best thing to do is to not promote your own stuff, but to find ways to help people, to build a tribe, to build a small, dedicated group of followers. And your primary goal with building this group of people is to help them. And you're not asking for anything in return, but you will see that the law of reciprocity begins to take effect, where as you help other people, they will find ways to help you. And as you create this network of goodwill, of generosity, where you're adding value to people's lives through the work that you create, they're going to want to share your work. And so I think that self-promotion is basically a misnomer. The only effective promotion isn't what I say about me, but what other people say about me. If you think about buying a product, as brilliant as Steve Jobs was, he was not the most reliable source for talking about how great Apple's products were. And I knew who Steve Jobs was for a long time before I bought an Apple product. It wasn't until all of my friends started using Macs and iPhones and iPads that I started to go, well, maybe there is more to this than just hype. And it wasn't when I was listening to the creator of the product, the founder of the company. It was when I was listening to all my friends whom I trusted talk about this thing that they all loved. And the same thing is true for you and your work. Whatever you could do to promote yourself, what other people are saying about you is 10 times more effective. So instead of trying to, talk about your stuff again and again and again, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I wrote a book or I have a blog or whatever, but it is much more advantageous to get other people to talk about you. And the best way to do that is not to ask them to talk about you, it's to just help them. And if you do that enough, in the right way, for enough people, some of those people are going to talk about you, because we all love to recommend good things, good products, great people, awesome books to our friends because that makes us look good to our friends, and we want to help our friends, and we love our friends. And so if you have something of value that the world needs, it's really just a matter of finding and creating the community that needs it. And that's just, a microcosm of probably the mass community that needs it. But if you can create a tribe, a small group of people around a certain idea or cause or story, and you can get them to tell this by just helping them, inspiring them, leading them, you won't have any problem with people finding out about who you are or what you do.
Jeff, Kelly Charles is interested in learning more about promotions and ideas regarding promotions.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the best kind of promotion is when other people do it for you. And I think that there are two types of promotion or marketing. The first type is the kind where you don't have permission. So you buy a bunch of ads, you buy a billboard on the side of the road. And this was basically how messages spread, how people promoted certain products and services for many, many decades. It's really what paid for television, for some of your favorite television shows. And it worked for the products. It worked for those companies and those brands for many years, because when we were growing up, when you saw an ad on television, you believed it. And it was just one of a few products on a few channels. But as we've gotten older and things have gotten more and more segmented, and people have gotten more and more distracted because there are more and more people asking for their attention, it just becomes hard to interrupt people. And so the better way to do it is to have permission. And I have to give credence to Seth Godin on this because he coined the phrase permission marketing. But really what he was doing was he was observing what was already beginning to happen in the marketplace and what he saw as a trend that has really turned into the way that we see the best messages spread and the ideas that take root and change culture. They're using this method of permission marketing, which is really simple. It's really human. If I want to influence you, I want to become your friend or lead you or get you to do something for me, we first have to have relationship. And in order to have relationship, we've got to get introduced. And once we get introduced, you need to see that I'm a good person and I'm somebody worth knowing. And the best way for me to do that is to find some way to help you, to add value to your life, to show you that I'm kind of a cool guy that's, worth hanging out with, and maybe you're going to learn something from me, or I'm going to buy you lunch or something. And that is how permission is built, much like dating. It's not just one or two times and then you ask the person to marry you, usually, but it's kind of a long road of building trust over time so that when it comes time to promote something, you already have a captive audience ready to listen to you, willing to hear what you have to say, and even do what you might ask them to do. And so, the tough thing is not promoting. If you do this right, it's not promoting, which people sometimes struggle with. How do I promote something? That's not the tough part. The tough part is getting permission in the first place. And I once wrote an article and got some great feedback from Seth on this, where I was talking about leadership and influence, and the best way to influence people, the best way to get people to do something for you or create an opportunity is to ask. And he said, Jeff, that's not really true. Certainly asking is part of the process, but it's not the secret. It's not the hard part. That's like saying the secret to, driving a Mercedes is, turning the key in the ignition. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting in the car, getting the keys in the first place, and having permission to enter into somebody else's world and be able to turn that light on to introduce that idea or even to sell that product. So it's hard, it's not easy. It does take time and patience and trust, and it's not instantly gratifying. But the good news is the part that everybody's dreading, the part of the ask, of the sell, of the, hey, I've got to promote this thing. I just have a book come out. Now everybody go buy it. If you've done a good job of paving the road by asking permission, getting people engaged in what you have to say, and they're ready to listen to you, when it comes time to promote anything, people will be ready.
Won't you roll the dice so I can know which way I should go?
Thank you for listening to this Q&A episode of The Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. You are welcome to submit your question to Jeff by going to facebook.com/GoinsWriter. Your question may end up on a future episode of The Portfolio Life. You're also welcome to visit Jeff's website, GoinsWriter.com, where you can learn more about writing, marketing, creative business ideas, and making a difference in the world. Thanks again for listening to the show.
Half-finished paintings don't make it into museums. Half-drawn blueprints don't make for well-constructed buildings, or any building at all. And half-finished manuscripts don't make for much of a story. In other words, you can only be inspired so far. You cannot create compelling art if you don't learn to focus.